We're going to continue with reading Gangsta Granny. We're up to the Love Bomb chapter, and it's written by David Walliams and illustrated by Tony Ross. Thank you. Ben had spent the whole of Sunday morning being measured up by Mum for his dance outfit. She had stayed up through the night sketching possible designs. Under duress, he was forced to choose one, and he pointed a limp finger at the one that he thought was the least hideous. Mum's hand-drawn options ranged from all the way from embarrassing to utterly humiliating, and there was the Wonderland and the fruit cocktail. Thunder and lightning, accident and emergency, ice and slice, and the hedgerow and the badger. There was Quality Street, eggs and bacon, confetti, the underwater world. There was Burning Love, Cheese and Pickle, the Solar System, and Piano Man. But the one that Ben thought was the least worst was the Love Bomb. "We'll have to find you a nice young girl to partner with for the competition," said Mum excitedly as she ran one of her fake nails under the sewing machine needle and it exploded. Ben hadn't thought about dance partners. Not only was he going to have to dance, but he was going to have to dance with a girl. Ooh. And not just any girl, but a revoltingly precocious, sparkly, fake tanned leotard wearing over made up one as well as a girl. Ben was still at a stage when he thought girls were as appealing as frog spawn. "Oh, I'm just going to dance on my own," he spluttered. "Oh, a solo piece," exclaimed Mum. "How original." "In fact, I can't stand here talking all day. I'd better go and practice," said Ben as he disappeared upstairs to his room. He shut the door and turned on the radio and then climbed out of the window and raced over to Granny's bungalow on his bike. "So, you were running off into the woods when Lord Davenport started shooting at you," Ben was eagerly prompting his Granny. And for a moment her mind looked blank. "Oh, was I?" said Granny, looking increasingly befuddled. "That's where my story ended last night. You said you had snatched the ring from the Davenport's bedroom, and you were running across the lawn when you heard shots." "Oh, yes, yes," muttered Granny, her face suddenly illuminated. Ben smiled broadly. He suddenly remembered how he used to love his Granny telling stories when he was younger, transporting him into a magical world. A world where you paint pictures in your mind that are more thrilling than all the movies or TV shows or video games in the universe. Only a couple of weeks ago he had pretended to be asleep to stop her telling bedtime stories. Clearly he had forgotten how thrilling stories could be. "Well, I was running and running," continued Granny breathlessly, as if she were actually running. "I heard a shot ring out, and then another, and I knew from the sounds it was definitely a shotgun and a rifle." "What's the difference?" asked Ben. "Well, a rifle shoots one bullet and is more accurate, but a shotgun sprays hundreds of little deadly balls of lead. Any idiot can hit you if they fire a shotgun in your direction." "And did he?" said Ben. His face smile had faded now, and he was genuinely worried. "Oh, yes, but luckily I was that far away by then, so I was only grazed. I could hear the dogs barking too, and they were hunting me, and I was only a small girl. If they caught me, the hounds would have ripped me to shreds." Ben grasped in horror. "So how did you get away?" he asked. "Well, I took a chance. I couldn't outrun the dogs through the forest. The fastest runner in the world wouldn't be able to do that. And I knew the woods really well. I used to play in them for hours with my brothers and sisters. And I knew if I could just get across the stream, the dogs would lose the scent." "How come?" "Well, dogs can't follow a scent across the water. And there was a great oak tree just the other side of the stream. And if I climbed that tree, I might be safe." Ben could not imagine his Granny climbing a tree. And yet, even the stairs. She had lived in her bungalow ever since he could remember. More shots rang out through the darkness. As I ran through the stream, continued the old lady, and as I stumbled in the gloom of the forest, I tripped on a tree root and fell face first into the mud. Scrambling to my feet, I turned around to see an army of men on horseback led by Lord Davenport. They were carrying flaming torches and holding shotguns. The whole forest was lit up with fire from the torches. I jumped into the stream. It was around this time of year, in the depth of winter, and the water was icy. The cold shocked me, and I could hardly breathe. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. I could hear the dogs getting nearer and nearer, and barking and barking. There must have been dozens of them. I looked behind me, and I could see their sharp teeth gleaming in the moonlight. So I waded across the stream, and I started climbing the trees. My hands were muddy, and my legs and feet were wet, and I kept slipping down the trunk. I frantically rubbed my hands on my nightshirt and began to climb again. I scrambled to the very top of the tree and stayed as still as I could. I heard the dogs and the army of Davenport's men follow the stream down to a different part of the forest. The dogs' ferocious barks became distant, and after a while the torches were just specks in the distance. I was safe. I shivered up that tree for hours. I waited until dawn, slid down the tree, and made my way back to our cottage. I crept into bed and lay there for a few moments before the sun rose. Ben could picture everything that she described perfectly in his mind. Granny had him utterly spellbound. "Did they come looking for you?" "Well, no one got a good enough look at me, so Davenport had his man search everywhere in the village. Every cottage was turned upside down to look for the ring." "Didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to. I felt so guilty, but I knew if I owned up I would be in deep trouble. Lord Davenport would have had me publicly flogged in the village square." "So what did you do?" "I swallowed it." Ben couldn't believe his ears. "The ring, Granny? You swallowed it?" "Well, I thought it was the best way to hide it." "In my stomach. A few days later, when it came out when I went to the toilet." "Well, that must have been painful," said Ben, his bum wincing at the thought. Passing a big diamond ring out of the bottom didn't sound in any way enjoyable. "It was painful, excruciating, in fact," Granny grimaced. "The good thing was our cottage had been searched already from top to bottom." "Not my bottom, though. The bottom of the cottage, I mean," Ben chuckled. "And Davenport's men had moved on searching the next village. So one night I went off into the woods and hid the ring. I placed it where no one would look, under the rock in the stream." "Clever," said Ben. "But that ring was only the first of many, Ben. Stealing had become the biggest thrill of my life. And as I lay in bed each night, all I dreamed about was stealing one more, and then more and more diamonds. The ring was just the beginning," continued Granny in a low whisper, staring deep into Ben's innocent young eyes, "of a lifetime of crime." Hours passed in what seemed like minutes as Granny told her grandson how she had stolen every one of the dazzling items spread out on the living room floor. The huge tiara had belonged to the wife of the President of the United States of America, the First Lady. Granny told Ben how over 50 years earlier she had sailed all the way to America on a cruise liner to steal it from the White House in Washington, and whilst sailing back home she had robbed every rich lady on the ship of her jewels. How she was caught red-handed by the captain of the ship and escaped by diving overboard, swimming the last few miles of the Atlantic Ocean to England with all the jewelry hidden in her knickers. Granny told Ben that the sparkling emerald earrings that had been in her bungalow for decades were worth over £1 million each. They had once belonged to the wife of an enormously wealthy Indian Maharaja and Maharini. The old lady recounted how she enlisted the help of elephants to steal them. She had coaxed the elephants to stand on top of each other to form a giant ladder so that she could scale the the wall of a fort in India where the earrings were kept in the royal bedchamber. The most amazing tale of all was how she stole the enormous deep blue diamond and sapphire brooch that sat sparkling on her worn living room carpet. She told Ben it had once belonged to the last empress of Russia, who ruled with her husband the Shah before the Communist Revolution of 1917. It had been for many years under bulletproof glass at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, guarded by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year by a platoon of fearsome Russian soldiers. This theft had required the most elaborate plan of all. Granny had hidden in an ancient suit of armour in the museum, which dated back hundreds of years to the time of Catherine the Great. Each time the soldiers looked the other way, she would edge forward in the metal suit, a few millimeters, until she got close enough to the brooch. It took her over a week. "What, like Granny's footsteps?" asked Ben. "Exactly, young man," she replied. "Then I smashed the glass with the silver axe I was holding and grabbed the brooch." "How did you escape, Granny?" "That's a good question. Now, how did I escape?" Granny looked flummoxed. "Sorry, my age, boy. I keep forgetting things." Ben smiled supportively. "That's okay, Granny." Soon the old lady's memory seemed to come back into focus. "Oh yes, I remember," she continued. "I ran outside into the courtyard of the museum, leapt into a barrel of a huge cannon and fired myself to safety." Ben pictured this for a moment. His Granny, in the darkest, deepest of Russia, flying through the air in an ancient suit of armour. It was hard to believe, but how else could this little old lady come to have such an astonishing collection of priceless gems? Ben loved Granny's daring tales. At home, Ben had never had stories read or told to him. His parents just switched on the television and slumped down on the sofa when they got home from work. Hearing the old lady talk was so exciting. Ben wished he could move in with her. He could listen to Granny all day. "There can't be a jewel in the world that you haven't stolen," said Ben. "Oh, yes, there is, young man. Hang on. What's that?" "What's what?" said Ben. Granny was pointing behind Ben's head, an expression of horror on her face. It's what?" said Ben, daring not to turn around to see what she was pointing at. A shiver ran down his spine. "Whatever you do," said Granny, "do not turn around." And that is the end of the chapter for today. And it's David Walliams' Gangsta Granny, written by David Walliams, and of course, and illustrated by Tony Ross. See you next time.